The ANC today is engaging civil society organizations led by Party President Cyril Ramaphosa. We do believe that he is speaking. Let's listen in.
Leaders of various civil society organizations, religious leaders who are here with us, you are so many and diverse as leaders of our civil society organizations that I will not be able to go through the various names and identities, but I'd like to thank you all for being here and participating in this engagement with the African National Congress, and I'd like you to give yourselves a round of applause for being here. I say so advisedly because a number of you traveled long kilometers to be here, and at your own expense. Some of you traveled from as far afield as KZN, Eastern Cape, and so forth, and various other provinces in the country, Northwest, and so forth. So we really thank you for being here. This is the engagement that the ANC has longed for over a very long time. It was even endorsed and decided upon by the National Executive Committee right soon after we were elected. We knew that a gap had been formed in terms of our inability to engage at a fairly deep and serious level with you as civil society. In fact, as we were planning for this, in many of our minds it conjured up the days of the United Democratic Front. And we said, this is like a UDF come together once again. So we do thank you, and we really, with humility, say we are sorry that it has taken quite a while to have a gathering like this. Comrade Nomvula and the other officials, Comrade Mdu and Comrade Phoebe, were informing me that we are going to have provincial ones at the provincial level, and we will have another one like this, and I would like to see it much bigger. Of course, it costs money. In other iterations, particularly, say, for instance, in government, we have had an occasion, and some of you participated, in an engagement, particularly as we were navigating our way through COVID. We were able to have these engagements online, and we had at one stage up to almost 1,000 or 1,500 people online participating, giving their views. So as the ANC, we welcome this opportunity to do it face-to-face. The next one might also be online or whatever, but what I want to say is that we are going to remain engaged with you because we realize that we have allowed a gap, quite a bit of a chasm to develop between ourselves and our organizations, traditional and otherwise. I want to make you draw inspiration from what I think I did mention either January the 8th or so, when I quoted a poem by the German communist playwright and poet, Bertolt Brecht, when he said, and this has resonance and relevance here, some people will wage a struggle for a day. And he says that is good. Some people will wage a struggle for a year, and that is better. Some will wage a struggle for many years, and that is even better. But there are those who will wage the struggle for their entire lives. They are the ones that we cannot do without. Close quotes. Now, gathered here in your various organizations. We recognize that many of you, through your various organizations, you have been waging struggles for the rest of your lives. Some of the organizations have existed in the 80s and some in the 70s. And one of our participants here from NAFCOC, they've been involved since the 60s. They've been involved in the struggle to make the lives of South Africans better forever. And I welcome that, and this is what I really applaud, that amongst us here today are yourselves. And you have, as organs of civil society, on a voluntary basis, you've been engaged in the lives of our people, making the lives of our people better. And I applaud you, and I thank you for that. It is you who Brecht was talking about. Thank you very much. So as we welcome this opportunity, we as the African National Congress, in hearing more or less everything that you are saying, I could find identification with the priorities that we have set. We announced our priorities with the marquee statement that we make every January, which is the January 8th statement. And many of you who have spoken have touched on various aspects of what the National Executive Committee pronounced and what was set out as our priorities. And very briefly, I will set this out, but I do want to focus on many of the things that you articulated here. Our first priority is really aimed at the renewal of the ANC and forging even stronger unity within the African National Congress. That the NEC identified as the key priority, because the renewal of the ANC and the unity of the ANC will lead to the renewal of our nation. Ipso facto, it speaks for itself. When the ANC is disunited, when the ANC is not united, the South African nation is not united and the South African nation is not renewed. So therefore, our important priority is the renewal of the ANC, and that is what we are focusing on. Your coming to this meeting contributes to the renewal of the ANC. Precisely the issues that some of you were putting forward, that go back to the ground, to the grassroots, re-engage with our people, is part of our renewal process. So you are contributing, yes, by being here, by putting your views forward to that renewal process. And that is the priority that we were also given by the 55th conference of the ANC. And of course, a number of you also raised the issue of the second priority. And the second priority is about accelerating the work to deal with our current existential challenge, which is load shedding. A number of you raised it, and Mama here even raised it and said, load shedding is really frustrating us. It's having a negative impact on what you do, either in your businesses, co-ops, or in your NGOs. That is our second priority. And as you will have heard, we've embarked on a number of measures to address the load shedding. And day before yesterday, we had an announcement that the availability factor, electricity availability factor, has now increased in a number of power stations. And this is largely because of the work that we announced in our energy action plan, that we are now going to pay more attention and to focus on this. And to this end, I even appointed a Minister of Electricity, and that minister is now busy at work. Thirdly, we said that we want to mobilize social partners to increase employment and investment and deepen empowerment and transformation. This is what we are doing now, practically. We want to mobilize all our social partners. And you, as civil society, you play a critical role. And that is why we are very pleased that our engagement is formalized at the NEDLAC level, but it is also spread throughout the country through your organizations and the networks that you have. Our objective is to ensure that we mobilize our social partners with a view of deepening and broadening empowerment and transformation. And many of you have made many suggestions in this regard, which I will touch on in a little while. The fourth one is, of course, based on a number of issues that you raised, to ensure that we improve service delivery in terms of the services that we should deliver to our people, including infrastructure, be it in the rural areas or in the urban areas. That has been identified as a key priority because over time we've seen weakening. And that is why in 2021, one of the reasons why the ANC then dropped in terms of its share of the vote, it was because of service delivery. Our people correctly have raised this issue that we are not getting good services. And for us, it was a wake-up call. And the wake-up call also results in us saying we need to go to the ground and engage more. The fifth one was to strengthen the fight against crime and corruption. A number of you have raised the issue of corruption. A number of people have raised the issue of crime, be it the construction mafia crime, and which we will deal with. And the other important priority for us is to build a better Africa and a better world. Better world to spread the word of peace, to spread the word of peace building in the world, and to be involved in conflict resolution processes, which we are involved in a number of places, not only on our continent, but also continuing to say the conflicts that persist around the world must be solved in the way that Nelson Mandela taught us. Nelson Mandela taught us that the only way to resolve conflicts, including the apartheid conflict, by the way, when he wrote to the apartheid rulers, he said, the only way you will end the conflict in our country is for you to sit down with the leadership of the African National Congress. So he taught us that, and that is the word that we are spreading around the world, including on our own continent. And as I listened to the inputs, initially from the panelists and from many of you, the common thread through all this, as far as I could read, is collaboration, engagement, working together, finding solutions. And some of you were even bold enough to say, there is no problem without a solution. Every problem has a solution. And you even went on to say, civil society plays a critical role. It is almost at the center of ensuring that we solve our problems. That is the common thread that I have discerned from everything you were saying. To me, that proves the validity and the credibility of having you participating with us here in this engagement. And I heard very clearly, one of you said we want less talk by ANC officials, less talk by ANC members. We want to engage amongst ourselves and also, yes, with the president. We hear that very clearly because we need, as the ANC, and there are a number of members of the National Executive Committee, as Comrade Nomvula said, and we didn't bring all of them. We need to be hearing these messages that you were beaming. These for us are important messages, and our comrades have taken copious notes because there are things that we now need to act on moving from here. And you spoke about implementation. My brother from the BBC said that economic empowerment really should be the main plank that we look at, and I couldn't agree more. And with the number of messages that you put forward, don't think that it drops on deaf ears. You are saying that 40% procurement for women in government procurement must be legislated for. We have declared it, I said, we want to see 40% of what we procure in government being made available to women-owned businesses. And we've declared that as a policy, as a directive. Now, and because my sister here spoke so eloquently about the historic impediments that black women have always worked under for more, she said 2 centuries, 3 centuries, my sister, 3 centuries, because apartheid and colonialism, you've got to remember that it started even, slightly before 1652, but more formally when colonialism formally really started. So it's 340 years and plus, where black women were always held to the back. Now we're starting from that deficit point. And that deficit point means that we've got to take extra steps to empower the women of our country. And I was pleased to hear the statistics that many companies, many entities, businesses are started by women. And that is so true. But in the end, when it comes to the funding, the empowerment, the opening up of markets, the enablement, women are always pushed to the back. And that is why we have consciously, as a government, and I have also consciously said, we are going to empower the women of our country. Starting off with the cabinet. The cabinet that we have has 50% women, and that we need to applaud. We've got more deputy ministers who are women than men. And that too just demonstrates the direction in which we are going. Our empowerment of women is not Mickey Mouse, it is serious. And we are going to do it. But we also want them to participate meaningfully, as you correctly said, in the economy of the country. So we say we want them 40% procurement to be in the hands of women. And now we've got to work hard and harder. One, to make sure that the policy is embraced in government in real terms, not only to be written about, in real terms. And you are now, BBC, saying legislate for it. It's a good suggestion, and we will look at how we make that happen so that it goes just beyond being policy. It must now go beyond being the law that everyone must adhere to. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that, and I applaud you for that. And you say that we must be willing to take the risk to empower women and to empower young people. That's a very good thought and suggestion, because as a developmental state, and only one of you mentioned developmental, and I want to stress that we characterize ourselves as a developmental state. And at times we've been rather hesitant to be more developmental. We've tended to hold back and not really been forthright. We therefore need to be more forthright and make ourselves a fully fledged developmental state. And as a developmental state, there are risks that we've got to take to empower women and to empower young people. We need to be bolder than we are now. And yes, procurement gives us a very good lever to be able to do so. And of course, procurement gives us the lever to empower black people who were for almost 300 years held back. But when we talk about women, and one of the ladies raised that, yes, we are talking about women on a non-racial basis. We say, yes, women of our country, because women were oppressed, even under apartheid. My sister there in a yellow shirt spoke out on this. Even women during apartheid, white and otherwise, were always held back. So we want to see the empowerment of women. Of course, the majority of women in our country are black. You also spoke about criminality in the construction sector, that we need to tackle this. And I'm glad that the BBC Black Business Council is focusing on this, and that needs to be done. My brother from COSATU, and I will touch on the key issue that they raised. He says there needs to be collaboration. Collaboration is important in tackling our many, many, many challenges and problems. And he becomes focused on ensuring that we do not weaken the collective bargaining system and process in our country. The working people in our country want to resolve their problems through negotiation. And of course, this is a hard-won right. This right was fought for and won, and we should never weaken it. And I agree entirely. They had a complaint that government was weakening the collective bargaining process, and I do want to believe now that we have solved that. The strike was settled, and now they seem to be happy. I see a few smiles on his mouth from time to time. My brother Soli from civil society, it raises an important issue that sometimes we sign agreements and many people don't really understand what those agreements are, and then those agreements are used to the detriment of civil society organizations in our country, and some of those agreements are then used to undermine our civil society. And he says we need to be alert that there may well be other countries that want to weaken civil society and use civil society even against our government and against our people as well. And we have already seen that. For instance, Minister Motsoaledi speaks about how an organization, an American civil society organization, went to our courts and got our courts to rule that we should admit people from another country, and even without those people having set foot in South Africa. So these civil societies are being used in that way. Sister from the Youth Council also speaks very strongly about education and the curriculum. Absolutely right. Parts of our curriculum in our education still has elements of colonialism and elements of apartheid past. We need to reconstruct the curriculum so that the curriculum responds to the challenges that we face as a country and the challenges that we face as a continent, because we need to reconstruct it that it does respond and addresses those. The researcher, my sister, Xolelwa, talks about the historical context of civil society. And I thought that was very refreshing, because that made us look back. Because as civil society, we've got a very rich history of collaboration. This country is where we are today because civil society, your organizations, as I was saying, have helped to shape and build this country. Just to give you a good example, the constitution that we have today is the product of the engagement that we all had as South Africans. And sometimes when we look at our constitution, we think that, some parts of the constitution were imported from somewhere. They were not. This is a constitution that we crafted. And it was one of those processes where engagement was deep and rich. So we have a history. The United Democratic Front was almost the apex of our struggle as the ANC was still banned, but it was inspired by the African National Congress And it was actually the ANC that said, go ahead and form a united front so that it can unite our people. So we have a historical context. Of course, civil society organizations are not homogeneous, but we have converged in the past on a number of issues. That is why I've said, even in Parliament, that social compacting is a South African feature. We compact, we get together, we talk about things and build compacts and agreements. We had wanted to have a comprehensive social compact, and we had put together a timeline, and we were not able to reach that timeline. But what we have seen over time, as my sister Olelwa was saying, what we have seen is that we have been able to reach a number of compacts. The one that stands out, which has had to address a huge problem, a pandemic as I characterized it, was gender-based violence. The women of our country marched to the union buildings, and I was already at home, and I was told that the women say they are not going to leave, they are going to sleep at the union buildings, and they are going to wait for me. And people in my office said, oh, President, the light has set. And so I said, no, I have to go. And I went. And that was the beginning of the process of reaching the compact that we had around gender-based violence. And the strategic plan process then germinated or consolidated around that. So we've reached agreements and social compacts on a number of issues, even on the national minimum wage, which was in NEDLEC, and a number of you participated in that, that for the first time in the history of our country, we emerged with a national minimum wage. It was due to social compacting. And so we've done that even on health matters. Even as our health situation is a bit challenging, we have been able to do that. And NEDLEC has been the main reservoir of our compacting process. Yes, sometimes summits may not be that representative, but through NEDLEC, I think we've been able to achieve what many countries have not been able to achieve. When we talk about NEDLEC to other nations, they are actually amazed that we have a structure like that, and where the state is able to sit down, or rather the government, to sit down with various organizations. I'm often criticized that, oh, you consult too much, oh, you spend too much time consulting. And it is a feature of our life as South Africans, because when we do reach a compact, we then have a sense that we've all bought into. Recently, when I decided that we should have a Minister of Electricity, I hadn't even briefed my colleagues and comrades, even in the ANC. All of them said, the president has taken a decision on his own. And I said, okay, sometimes you say, I consult too much. When I take a decision, you complain. I just said, that is your problem. Sometimes I will not consult, and sometimes I will consult. And I said, you better get used to it. This is how I'm rolling now. This is how I am going forward. So some of them issued statements. COSATU issued a statement, the party. When I met them, I said, so what is this, comrade? What is this? They said, oh, now we understand, comrade. So sometimes I will not consult. As your president, sometimes I will consult. But consultation is part of our DNA. And that is how we should move forward. And there have been a number of inputs on gender-based violence, which I must say I've really appreciated. I've appreciated the focus on gender-based violence because it continues to be one of the overriding problems we have. And there's been reference on the LGBTQI+ community, but also we need to focus on albinism. Albinism, the attacks and the killings of people who live with albinism are completely unacceptable. And as South Africans, through our NGOs, we must rise against the attacks against people with albinism. And also, people with disabilities. I'm pleased that this was also raised here. We recently had a consultation forum with people living with disabilities. We reached really good conclusions and decisions on how government can improve the lives of people living with disabilities. So this has arisen here, and we are going to make sure that we take this forward. Some of you remembered how, some 2-3 years ago, I think 4 years ago, we used to see people coming along, walking with me. I still walk. I still do my walks, but people have been complaining. They say, no, President, you shouldn't walk alone. You should walk with us. So I'm going to restart. The Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture is the one who has raised it with me. Zizi Kodwa says he wants to start walking with me. And I said to him, it's 10 kilometers a time. When I go out for a walk, it's 10 kilometers. Sometimes it goes up to 26 kilometers. He says, but that's what I said. So those who will start. A doctor, I didn't catch your name. You mentioned we need to deal with mental health issues. This was really sharply raised during our meeting with the people with disability sector. And we need to have more resources deployed to address the challenge of people who live who suffer from mental health. And we can address this because when people have mental health issues, they really become so depressed, and the poverty that they live under makes things worse as well. And then one of you said the clinics are not safe. The issue of safety, and we addressed it. The Minister of Police was there as well in our meeting. We addressed it and said we need to ensure that the police are ever more present and visible, because that is why we are employing more and more police. But at the same time, we need to be paying attention to the employment of nurses, as this was also raised. Ki Tumetsi said we need economic justice, and she said we need to get the private sector should fund social movements. We've got 400,000 civil society organizations, and they need to be funded. We've come up with a proposal, one of you as well added, that we need the private sector, yes, to start helping to fund civil society organizations, and I couldn't agree more. And we should have more social workers employed. Yes, we agree that many social workers in our country, having qualified, are not finding employment. It is a matter that we are addressing, and I'm also focusing on it. Mfundisi, my brother here, said we need to receive the report on men. They've been drafting this report, and I've been waiting for it, on the role of men in gender-based violence. And I have found that when we also focus on men, of course we've got to focus on the terrible situation that women find themselves in when it comes to gender-based violence and femicide, because it is a pandemic, but we also have to focus on men. One university vice-chancellor told me that they have gone through a spate of rapes and even murders of young women at their university. One of the things that they started focusing on is to have men's dialogues. And he said, President, when we've held a few men's dialogues and we've seen the incidence of gender-based violence actually going down, to a point where women were now saying, Vice Chancellor, we can now move around on the university campus premises feeling much safer. Now, it is important for us as a nation to focus on men as well. We need to have those men's dialogues, and I'm pleased that I will be getting this report. And Tulani Chifuta says, when we say we want to address young people's challenges when it comes to substance abuse, we must not just be preaching at them. We must give them alternatives to move them away from drug usage. Alternatives need to be put forward. That's one of the things that I've said to the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture. I've said we now must focus on school sports. Our schools do not have sporting facilities. Of course, it's an infrastructure challenge, but we now need to raise the issue of sports amongst young people even more, so that as we wean them away from substance abuse, we must be able to offer them another choice, which is precisely what we should do. My sister Gumede, yes, she said, establish a fund to focus on black women. And we are working on putting together, yes, a fund. I even announced it during SONA. I said we want to put together a fund which will be focusing on the small, medium enterprise and, by the way, cooperatives, as it was mentioned here. And we've gone to the private sector and we say we want you to contribute. So setting up a fund does take a bit of time. Another country on the continent has set up a really good fund to focus on the small, medium enterprise sector. So we are going to start sort of moving on this one, because it is when you fund women-owned businesses, it is when you focus on women and empowering them more that you are able to create more opportunities. When we became chair of the African Union, that was before COVID, one of our objectives was to set up a fund to empower women on our continent. But COVID came and we focus more on COVID than on that, but we still must go back there. I like the theme from the Black Business Council in the second iteration when they responded to the issues. And I like this theme. They say, we must solve our own problems, but we must also implement our policies, and we must appoint competent people, particularly at the municipality level, to lead our local economic development plans. I could not agree more. And they say, don't use that as a dumping ground to dump useless people, people who don't know what they are doing. And this is precisely what the ANC is focusing on, so that we can have people who are good at what they do, people who are well qualified, people who will be able to address the challenges that our people are facing. Katia mentioned mental health, so I've covered that. And then President of NEHAWU mentioned the issue of the NHI, and we couldn't agree more. One of you also mentioned it. The National Health Insurance is an important policy that the African National Congress has taken. And you were asking, where is it? It is navigating its way through the chambers of our parliament, and it is a bill that will soon be presented to the president once it has gone through that process for signature. It has taken a long time. And of course, the other problem we have, and we're having to deal with, is that our legislative process tends to take a rather long time. And when you want to pass a law, you are looking at almost 3 years before the law is properly passed. So we are going to be reviewing that. I know other countries are doing exactly the same. Yes, the issue of expropriation of land without compensation has come up. You will have seen that the expropriation bill will soon be on the president's desk. Actually, it's working its way there. It's been debated and so forth. I was asked a question by one of the parties in Parliament about the Expropriation Act. The Expropriation Act, like any other country, every country in the world has an Expropriation Act to enable government to be able to expropriate land, and in some cases there's payment of compensation, in some cases there is no payment of compensation. That is what nearly all governments have, because the government does need to have an instrument to be able to take land for public purposes and public use, to move the country forward. It's either economically, service delivery, and so forth. For instance, if we need to build an electricity line across somebody's land, government is allowed, in terms of the law, to expropriate the land and build infrastructure that will be used for public purposes. So, Expropriation Act is going to address a number of purposes for the interests of our people. There's a complaint that NGOs are being destabilized by officials, and I am not aware of this, but I suppose you, when you interact with our officials, sometimes there may be a sense that they're being destabilized. What I can say is that there is no policy in government to destabilize NGOs. In fact, NGOs play an important role in our architecture as government. Last year, we held a civil society summit, and many of you would have been there. I certainly know that Tulani was there, played a big role, and a few of you. So we do not have a policy that destabilizes or destroys NGOs. What we do have, however, is a big challenge. There are 400,000 NGOs, and a number of NGOs are funded by government, but not all NGOs, in the end, get funding from government. Of course, we would love to do that, but the fiscal challenges that we have are such that we will not be able to do that to good effect. So, healthy economy requires a healthy population. One of you said that, couldn't agree more. Thabang spoke, and this is when the question was asked, the future that we want. And I'm glad that almost 36 of you spoke on this issue. And I'll run very quickly through some of the proposals you made. You started off by saying a healthy economy requires a healthy population. We need to focus on health. And health is one of the key areas where we are pouring money in. The first one that takes much of our budget is education. Education is funded in a very big way. The next one is health. The next one is our debt payments. And those three are the ones that chew up quite a lot of money. And of course, under health and education, that's where we pay salaries. So salaries is a big spend, but it falls also under a number of the other departments. Thabang said the Table Tennis Association is going to be hosting the World Tennis. And what he was really saying in terms of the future we want is that we should applaud them, because they are going to be hosting the World Tennis Association. The last one was held in 1939 in Egypt. So this is a great achievement for South Africa, that we are going to be on the world map and we are going to be hosting the World Tennis event. This is great for our country. So really, you're weak in your applause. It's almost like 2010, the World Cup of football. So it is important. And someone said we need a proper expression of the non-racial character of the ANC. And we need to be focusing on that, because, yes, this is where we've been a bit weak. The non-racial character of the ANC has been weakening, and I have said so on a number of occasions. Now we've got a number of people in our organization, including white young people, who've come to the fore, who've said, we have joined the ANC, we love the ANC, we love what the ANC stands for, the way that it embraces everyone. And they have said, we want to lift up the non-racial character of the ANC. It needs to be seen by all and sundry that the ANC is the home of all South Africans. Every South African, be they white, be they Indian, be they so-called colored, be they African, they, men and women, they must feel that the ANC is their home. And that is what the ANC has always been. In the past, we have said the ANC is the parliament of our people. But in the end, the ANC is the home of all South Africans. And they want to launch a desk that will focus on this. I have said that we're going to discuss this matter, as I promised them, and we will finalize it DSG. We must make sure that this matter is finalized so that we can give real serious attention to the non-racial character of the ANC and begin to mobilize all South Africans to be part of this glorious movement. And my sister Pillay said we need to focus on skills development and we must capacitate our government. That is important because she said we are a diverse group. And she, being of Indian origin, says we would like as many Indian people to be part of the ANC as they've always been, and we welcome that. So that is the non-racial character of the ANC being played out. And skills development has been mentioned by many of you, and the role of NGOs in the development of skills. But you also mentioned that it is important that as we develop these skills, we must also work at that local level. Mbasa said that he represents an organization of more than 1 million people, and he said implementation is important. That's the one who said, where are we with NHI? Tumelo said, we must meet more often like this to discuss solutions. And she said, apart from meeting more often, which I addressed right at the beginning, because for us this is an important forum. And the one thing that I initially said to my comrades, because they said, President, we want you to address the people. I said, no. I don't want to do that. I want our people in NGOs must speak. They must tell us their own issues, and then we will then respond. And this is precisely what we're doing. When we next engage, we will have more time so that you are able to articulate the issues that are important to you. And we will take copious notes so that we are able to address the issues that you raise. Tumele said, we must fund the fight. We must make sure that when it comes to the empowerment of women, we must fund the fight, meaning that NGOs must be funded. My sister here spoke about load shedding, and she did articulate a view, and I have addressed that. There was a gentleman who's wearing a tie, looking very handsome, but I got to hear that he comes from Scientology. And I wrote here that he's Mr. Empowerment of Communities, because Scientology, and the lady sitting next to me there comes from Scientology. She tells me that they work on empowerment of communities, like he stood up and said. And this is what we really want to be getting engaged with you, that yes, all of us have work to do. And the BBC was very clear. We must all engage in finding solutions. And we must get involved in service delivery. And there was a pastor who spoke about, we must educate people about voting. And he is so right. What we are finding and in a number of countries as well, we are finding that a number of people don't really know how to vote. We did a massive voter education process in 1994, prior to those elections. And over time, we have gone down. We have not been paying a lot of attention on voter education. So we now need to do so. And organizing department, SGO, and the elections department now have to focus on this ahead of the 2024 elections. And thank you very much for raising this. We now need to embark on voter education. I was in KZN over the weekend, and many volunteers were out there in the meeting that we held, and we said they must now make sure that they go from house to house to find out whether people are registered. So it should be voter registration and voter education. Issue of shortage of nurses we've spoken about, and we must utilize our resources properly. My brother Machidi from Nadel, he raised a very important point as well. And he said, we've had a historic relationship with the ANC, and over time that has weakened because we're no longer engaging. And not only Nadel, but a number of organizations want that engagement. But he also says we must also focus on monitoring and evaluation. Deputy Secretary General, the second one, is going to be focusing on monitoring and evaluation. And Machidi says focus on inputs and outputs. Lekalakala says funding is not a problem. Stop working in silos. This is precisely what our district development model is seeking to address, that we must be an engaged government, a joined-up government, and stop working in silos. I keep on sending ministers back, and I say, you cannot be coming forward and just to focus on your issues. Where are the others who work with you in this area? You need to be working together. Menzi says cooperatives are serious. Yes, and even my brother, Mr. Co-ops, has raised the issue. Cooperatives are important. It can be worker co-ops, it can be farming co-ops, and so forth. We have now started the process of focusing on co-ops, but we need to do more. And civil society, as my brother, Mr. Co-op, was saying, is well represented in NEDLEC. Musa Chabalala, I think I had that name, from Orange Farm. He says, the future we want is that education should be like an AK-47. Don't know what he meant. Maybe he was one of those. But he also says it must be people-driven. Another brother from Soweto, he says, I'm Soweto born. I didn't hear his name. He says he's an entrepreneur and he works in the arts. And the arts must participate in all the endeavors. And this is precisely what our new minister is also going to be doing. The creative industry, one of my sisters also raised this. So we are going to focus on this. My sister, Comrade Fryer, then raises the issue. And the one issue that she's been big on is basic income grant. She's big on that. She talks about BIG, all the time. And we are working. The ANC, when we introduced the 350, we introduced it at a very challenging time in the history of our country. And we introduced it in the wake of saying workers who are employed are facing challenges because the factories and the companies they work for had closed. And so therefore UIF needed to come in. I then said, but there are people who are unemployed, who were running either their spaza shops, who were running whatever. What about them? I then said, let us address those people. The budgetary constraints obviously kicked in, and we could only do a 350. But when we introduced it initially, it was 6 million people who came forward, and then it grew to 11 million. And it became a big challenge. But I continued to say we cannot drop these people because some of them really rely on this money. And yes, we're becoming a big welfare state, but we need to demonstrate as the ANC government that we care for our people, that we are a caring government, and even if we will give them that little bit of money, it does help. Of course, ordinarily we should be, taking it to another level, to 600 and something, and in the end, we need to embrace the basic income grant. So we are in the process of talking about it, workshopping it, and comrades like my sister Fryer is involved in those discussions. And those discussions will continue, and we need to be focusing on a whole number of issues and the impact that a basic income grant will do to the lives of our people, and in the end, the economy as well, as they often say to me. One of my sisters spoke about the interns, that yes, part of the whole presidential employment stimulus was to bring in interns. We succeeded in bringing in almost 800,000 young people and slightly older people, particularly in schools and in a number of other sort of endeavors or entities. And they have helped a great deal. But because of budgetary constraints, the number has had to be reduced. But we have seen the work they've done and their own experience that they have earned. So that to us has been a really great opportunity for them. But she also says we must implement the district development model, because it is through that we will be able to win. One of the participants spoke about construction, and he wants a one-on-one. He says, President, I want a one-on-one with you, and we will solve all these problems. Wow, come on, bring it on. Come and have a one-on-one with me, because you are the person I want so that we can solve all these construction mafia problems and so forth. But more seriously, yes, my brother, I'm willing and prepared to have a one-on-one with you. They will arrange it. My sister Jane speaks about poverty and lack of service delivery, and she wants the police to intervene in areas where they are not often seen. So that too, I agree to. And one of my speakers here said basic education, and we need to focus more on basic education. I must say, basic education generally gets the lion's share of our budget, both at basic education level as well as higher education level. Basic education, we've got like 12 million young children who go to our schools. Every day of the week, 9 million of them get food that is delivered by our government. When I went to school in Soweto, I was never fed by the government, and many of us who went to school then. The government is demonstrating its total commitment on education, and of course we've got to keep improving the delivery of education in our schools. That we will continue to do. But our commitment to education, both at basic school level and at university level, is full and complete. And we will continue to do so. As I run away from the sun, we will continue to do so. At higher education level, 800,000 young people get NSFAS funding. We have deployed billions of rands to help our children, our young people, to get well funded. Of course, there are still challenges, but we have raised this from a low level to a much higher level, and we will continue to do so. I just want to assure you that our commitment to improving education is total, and we will continue funding education in the biggest of ways. That you can be assured of. And of course, another challenge that we face, of course, is infrastructure in our education facilities. There was one Director General from Limpopo who said, improving infrastructure facilities in Limpopo alone in our schools, if we go at this rate, it will take us 75 years. That is how big the challenge is. And we are now saying we need to come up with innovative ways, new ways of funding our infrastructure. Because what we inherited from apartheid misrule, you want to shift this, what we inherited from, yes, thank you. What we inherited from apartheid misrule was so horrendous that it will, yes, literally take us those many years. But talking to the Minister of Finance, we are saying, let us come with new, clever ways of funding infrastructure in our schools, building new classrooms, building new schools, and forward sort of funding those facilities. Because if we go just continue at this rate in all our provinces, it will take us literally 50 years before we improve the infrastructure in our schools, particularly in rural areas and townships. So we are looking at that so that we avoid this horrible incident of children falling into pit latrines and dying and drowning. Because that, for us, is a real shame. And it's a tragedy that we need to work towards eliminating altogether. NAFCOC said we want to rekindle old partnerships because we must continue getting close to business. Andy spoke about people with disabilities. They need assistance. I spoke about that. Lindelwa spoke about digital technologies. Now, the former Minister of Digital Communications and Digital Technologies had focused, and Minister Gungubele is going to focus on this, to make sure that we ensure that there is connectivity throughout the country, and they have started identifying how best we can do that, working together with our various digital companies. So I liked this input from my brother who spoke about Peace Community Foundation, that we should build peaceful infrastructure. And peace building, he said, is important. And more importantly, he said, we must teach young people to embrace peaceful ways of solving problems. This, for me, is quite important, and we should move in that direction. Sia from OR Tambo. And I want to thank you for traveling all the way from the Eastern Cape to be here. You want robust engagement at local government as well. And you are the one who said engagement must not be dominated by, yes, ANC officials. And in a way, we've made sure that it isn't here. And that you should be the ones who speak more pointedly with us. Santaco wants the resolutions to be implemented, and yes, that will be so. Joy said the 54th resolution where the ANC must bring back the cultural desk must be implemented. Deputy SG, you have heard yourself. We need to work on that, and the creative industry should be focused on. The churches need support, and we agree with that. The churches have been saying to us they don't have sites to build their churches. When they go to local government, they are not given much help. And the churches also said, we have not fully acknowledged the role they played during COVID, because they played an important role during COVID. And there are about 300,000 churches in our country. And they said, we are one sector that was not even financially assisted. I agreed. I said, yes, we didn't find a way of being able to do it because there are so many. In the end, we also tried to assist members of Santaco, and we found that there are so many, we couldn't find a very clever way of being able to do so. But it does not mean that the willingness was not there. But we are going to have an opportunity to meet with our faith-based organizations and really thank them for the role that they played during this whole process. Ubaba Matlangu from Contralesa, they want the Department of Land Reform to assist with development in the rural areas. Now, I had a meeting yesterday with the House of Traditional Leaders and Khoisan leadership. We agreed that the work that has been done by the Deputy President, former Deputy President Mabuza, will be carried on by Deputy President Mashatile to look at the land reform process. We have made a lot of progress. We are now almost at the finishing line. A paper is going to be brought to Cabinet, and we will be able to address this issue of land reform in the areas where our traditional leaders give leadership. But the issue of development in the rural areas is for us an important issue, and we have embarked on and are embarking on a number of projects. For instance, some of our catalytic projects, for instance, like rural bridges. The rural bridges that we are going to build are in the rural areas to help our rural people to be able to do business and to be able to travel easily. We are going to build a number of bridges, and Minister Sihle Zikalala is going to be working on that. We are also going to embark on a mega project, which is the building of the Umzimvubu Dam. This dam has been under discussion for more than 20-something years. And now we are going to make sure that it is actually started. There are 2 dams in that whole water system. We are going to start the process of developing that. And that, together with a number of other projects that we are going to embark upon in the rural areas, just goes to show that, yes, we will focus on the areas where 30% of our population stay. Because 30% of South Africans now live in the rural areas. The other almost 60-something% has moved to the urban areas. We therefore need to develop our rural areas so that more and more people are able to go back to the rural areas or stay there where there will be economic activity. My sister, speaking on behalf of this industry that is 585 billion rand big, has put together their very important proposal. And I think I read in between the lines, they are going to stop blocking the highways. They are going to stop blocking the ways for all of us so that we can travel nicely. And they will open the roads. They also want us to open power stations so that they can deal with the transportation of coal through the rail as well, 20%. And that is something that represents progress that we can talk to them on. And I really appreciate that. And thank you very much for being the last speaker. So I'd like to end and conclude, because she was the last speaker. There were 39 people who spoke, and there were the panelists who also spoke. I think this has been a really good engagement, a meaningful engagement. Many of you have raised issues, and I know that many more wanted to raise issues. As Deputy Secretary General, as well as Comrade Nduli said, we will do this again. We want to thank you and honor you for being here, for being part of this engagement. For us as the African National Congress, this is deeply meaningful, and we thank you because you've been able to give us your messages, and it has not been a one-way process where the ANC has been talking at you. You have been putting forward your views, and what we have done is to agree with you that the issues that you have raised are very much in line with the priorities that were identified by the ANC National Executive Committee. So I thank you for being here, and like to say, please come back again when we will have a more meaningful engagement. Thank you very much. Forward with civil society, forward. Amandla. Thank you very much.
Copious notes. Thank you very much.
I did take the notes.
Well, being just over an hour, we've just been listening to ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa. It is an engagement with civil society
President
in the build-up to
Ramaphosa,
next year's
viva!
ANC campaigns for the 2024 general elections. Of course, been hearing from a number of people who've been voicing their concerns, pretty much going through every big issue that the country is facing at the moment. As the president of the ANC said, 39 speakers. We're talking about more women empowerment, the youth in our country, gender-based violence, attacks on people with albinism, potholes, load shedding, blackouts, the national health insurance, the expropriation bill, health and what it's costing our country, higher education, basic education, infrastructure replacement, people with disabilities. But as the president began to wrap up, he said copious notes have been taken. So this was a chance for civil society to stand on that podium with that microphone and tell the president of the ANC and the ruling party exactly what they think is wrong and what they want the ruling party to do. There is an awful amount to go through. We won't be able to cover it in the next few seconds for you. But if you stay with us here on eNCA throughout the afternoon, we'll be able to do that for you in the next hour or so.